It is finished. Jesus' breathing has stopped and his agony is ended. But for those who loved him most, it feels as though the pain and trauma will march on forever. They are not even allowed to touch him or tend to his lifeless body without permission from the very powers who took his life. This may sound too familiar to those who have lost loved ones during our current pandemic, but this is not a virus. It is human hate and cruelty. Politics without compassion created a chasm they cannot freely cross. It's old news, business as usual in the empire. So Jesus' loved ones stand and wait in the gap as we stand with them this hour. Throughout this week, we have accompanied Jesus finally to arrive at this sacred moment. We have felt the pressure building and the constriction of increasingly narrow passage. The nearly inevitable collision between domination powers and Jesus' passion has occurred. We stand in the gap with the men, and particularly the women, who are powerless to protect him, powerless to ease his pain, and finally, powerless to save his life. We all know in some way what that pain is like. It comes when we bear witness to bodies of color blown to the ground by bullets or attacks aimed at Asian women and men, or a knee to a fragile neck. Loved ones, friends, witnesses forcibly held at bay by powers of violence. The aftershocks come wave after wave as we watch another trial, see another mass shooting, learn of another body harmed. We feel powerless to halt the grinding forces of violent domination. It is hard to breathe. The constrictions of COVID isolate us and prevent us from visiting those we love who are ill or in the hospital. We stand now in the bleakness of separation, in the shadow of death. Many of us, too many of us, have suffered the death of someone we love that we could not touch or be physically close to. Such anguish, such fear and pain when without our presence the loved ones we love have died alone. Even in the death of bodies of our beloved ones, then stay out of reach, waiting to be honored. As the list of memorials stack up, we wait and wait until we can grieve together. What in God's name can help us? Love. Love can help us in all the gaps and chasms of our lives. Love that recognizes no barriers. It leaps fences and penetrates walls. Love is the only thing that can rend all the curtains of separation in this world. It was the women close to Jesus who knew and trusted the power of this love. Through the death of the other two men crucified with him, the women waited. Because of love, they stayed through the earthquake and the darkened sky, even through the sudden quiet and inevitable return to business as usual. They stayed. Of those three women of love, there are three named in another gospel. 3 Marys. Mary Magdalene, whose mind and body had been restored by the healing power of Jesus to become his lead disciple. Mary, the sister of Lazarus, then Martha, whose lavish tears and hair caressed Jesus' feet just before he entered Jerusalem. And Mary, Jesus' mother, who fiercely courageous love had birthed him and held him tenderly to breast, undaunted by the reality that his life's course would pierce her own heart. It was Mary, his mother, whose love and encouragement at a wedding in Cana 3 years before had given him the courage to acknowledge his calling and step into his deepest self. It was Mother Mary who knew who he was and what he was capable of doing. This Mary was no stranger to the ways systems of violent domination behave towards those who challenge their authority and power. She must have known that the path ahead was dangerous and that it was almost inevitable that Jesus' passion and compassion would lead to collision with those very forces. And Jesus must have been afraid. But because of Mary's love, he could do what he was sent to do. His mother loved Jesus into his future. Mary, the sister of Lazarus, also knew who Jesus was and the depth of God's power within him that could bring life out of death. Just 1 week before Jesus' death, she had knelt at a crowded dinner table to break an alabaster jar filled with priceless perfume, hands to feet, hair to skin. Mary didn't need words. Her yearning, her worship, her gratitude, and her love were expressed and enacted through her body. Just as Jesus later broke bread with his disciples, Mary broke open the jar in her hands and allowed its contents to pour freely over Jesus' feet. Jesus, rather than shunning her intimate gesture, received Mary's gift into his own body with gratitude, tenderness, pleasure, and blessing. The holy sacraments there were skin, salt, sweat, and tears. The instruments of worship were perfumed feet and unbound hair. This was no abstract piety of the mind. It was love manifest in physical extravagance. Immediately after Mary anointed Jesus, he entered the city of Jerusalem, whose perimeter was already spotted with crucified bodies. He received Mary's love and took it with him into Jerusalem. He acted out of her love as he washed the feet of his disciples, especially when he washed the feet of Judas, who was about to betray him, and Peter, who would deny him. I think he felt once again Mary's gentle touch when he was being beaten. He held on to Mary's love desperately when he hung on that cross. I think he still felt the love of these women when he bowed his head and said, "It is finished." Jesus was loved into his future of ultimate solidarity with all those who suffer by those who loved him. And then Jesus took all that love into the tomb, and it loved him into his future as the resurrection and the life. That same love holds us this day. The inexhaustible love of she who is, creator of all that is, surrounds us and abides in us. She holds us as she did Jesus, and the women who stayed, and the men who found their way, and the unnamed others. In our anguish in the gaps of our lives during nightmares of hate and supremacy, love stands with us still. And dear ones, her love holds all those whom we have lost and could not hold. God's love crosses all the chasms of our lives, even those we create. It recognizes no barriers, leaps fences, penetrates walls, rending all the curtains of separation this world has to offer. Love will arrive at its destination, even when we cannot. How we have longed to be like the women who stayed with Jesus, at least able to be in sight. This is our moment. In the Kairos time of God, we are there holding him and all those who we could not. In the name of the love of God. In this sacred moment, let us carry the love of the Marys with us. Let us receive, like Jesus, the love of she who is the creator of all that exists. Then may we love each other into our future in solidarity with all who suffer and are lost in the world.